afternoon, everyone. My name is Lewis. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all well. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the albums that I've been listening to recently. I'm going to provide some background information about each album in turn, and then briefly talk about some of the reasons why I like these albums and why I recommend them. Now, let's start at the beginning. The first album is going to be an Italian soundtrack, and it's from 1971, and it is called The Confessions of a Police Commissioner and a State Prosecutor. Hopefully I have translated that successfully from Italian. If I haven't, please let me know. The composer on this album is a Rosario Ortolani, who also goes under the pseudonyms of Roger Higgins and Peter Jones. An Italian composer, arranger and conductor who has scored over 200 movies in his career. This is an atmospheric soundtrack with an underlying sinister tone to it, as it should be. It successfully pulls off the trick of combining pastoral themes with thumping bass riffs and swagger-fueled lead guitar. Try and get your mouth around that sentence. All very interesting. Very interesting album. Certain tones on this album reappear a year later under the more famous Nino Rota soundtrack, The Godfather. I would argue strongly that this particular album is much better than The Godfather, despite The Godfather being, not even on the same scale in terms of like what's in the public imagination. But in terms of sheer musicality, this one each and every time. The tracks that I would listen to on this particular album would be Il Ricordo di Serena, Promise di Guitizia, and the last track would be Serena Il Lumuno. Hopefully I haven't butchered the Italian that badly. Please forgive me if I have. I don't mean to cause any offence. Yeah, really good album. Please do listen to it on one of the streaming sites before committing to it. But yeah, a worthy soundtrack album. One of my favourites in my catalogue of soundtrack albums. This is one of my favourite ones. It's really nice. The second album for today, again, is something that I really do enjoy. It was released in 1974, and it's an album by a pair of brothers called Javier and Leon Velez, otherwise known as Elkin and Nelson. This is a prog rock, funk, psychedelic, traditional Spanish standards odyssey. That's the only way I can describe what's actually occurring on this album. It's absolutely fantastic. The album's called Angel and Demons, which is aptly named because the angel side of things is traditional standard Spanish tunes, which are restrained, and they do have that lovely thing of rolling R's when they are singing those particular tunes. That I love all that. But I would say the demon side is where the action happens, and I think this is where the brothers come into their own by, their personality emerges. Yeah, this is an energetic and flamboyant album. It never outstays its welcome, and it's definitely doesn't fall for that tragic thing of style over substance. This is quite the opposite. This is substance before style. They just happen to be stylish as well. Musicians of note on this particular album would be an Eduardo Leyva on keyboard and Pepe Ebano on percussion. Yeah, they're partly responsible for why I'm fully immersed once I commit to this album, listening to it. Those two gentlemen help Elkin and Nelson do what they do best. The tracks to look out for on this particular album, in my opinion, would be Jibaro. It's quite a famous tune, but if you've never heard it, you're in for a treat. A Brand Paso Aho and Quano Legare. The third track, the Quino Legare, partly why I'm mentioning it, I do like it in and of itself, but it's, in my opinion, it's similar to a track by a group called Two Man Sounds, and it's a disco track by the name of Carte America. This is just a more downbeat version of the melody being used. Have a listen to both tunes. Uh, Let me know if you agree with me in terms of there's a connection between those two tracks. But yeah, this is an album, a really fun one, particularly the Demon side. So do have a listen on the streaming sites. If you do happen to see it, I would say just buy it. If it's for reasonable money and you can afford it, get it. You won't regret it. I didn't mean to make a pun there, but it kind of worked out. So yeah, there you go. The third album is a more somber affair, and this is a 1972 release, and it was co-produced by Mr. David Axelrod and Cannonball Adderley, called The Auction. Yes, right, I'll get into it. I've got a couple of Axelrod albums. He's a really creative composer and musician, and a lot of his inspirations come from poets of the past. Now, one of the other albums I've got was inspired by William Blake. This particular one, The Auction, is inspired by the poems of the American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. I would say, if you get an opportunity, please do look up this gentleman. He is a fantastic human being as well as a poet, but definitely on the human level, he has a personality which we should all aspire to. Of note in terms of musicians on this album would be Joe Sample of the Crusaders on piano and King Erison on congas. They do a really good job on this. Now, I would say this is an album where I'm going to contradict myself almost immediately. I would suggest to you, when you listen to this album, you place your mind in a way that you're going to listen to the entire body of work. You're not trying to single out particular tracks, because this is a complete immersive experience. So, in saying that, just to give you an understanding of what this album contains, the track Vedette by sung by and Alexander St. Charles will give you a really good insight to what's contained on this album. That certainly did make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'm super glad that this album exists. Despite many being triggered by it, I'm not going to lie, this is for mature tastes. But it deserves, it's intensely personal. This is an album which deals with the harsh and hard reality of a slave's existence. So, you know, there's despair in this particular album, and that shouldn't be avoided in my opinion. So there's quite a few heart-wrenching spiritual tracks on this particular album. But yeah, be brave, give it a listen to, and if you agree with me that this is one that you should have in your collection, I would seek this one out and pay what I need to get it. I certainly don't regret having it. So yeah. The fourth album for today is by a gentleman called James Mason, not to be confused with the 60s and 70s actor. This is a 1977 release, and it's called Rhythm of Life. I do like the kind of graphics around him. It's kind of like that ready brick, I've eaten well this morning kind of thing, and I'm radiating, that I'm not hungry. Um, yeah, this is one of those albums that, makes me happy. It's mood enhancing. I certainly feel better after listening to it in general. Um, yes, kind of funny story behind this one in terms of my personal stories. I used to get confused between this artist James and another gentleman called Harvey Mason. Partly to do with when I heard the standout track from this album, Sweet Power, and Harvey Mason's Groovin' You. I heard them roughly at the same time. So I used to interchange each artist's name with each other, and it's like I thought it was the same person for quite a while until that was all clarified, and I'm super glad that I did clarify that. Um, yeah, this is just a really good album. Um, I got three tracks which I think are certainly noteworthy on this album. Oh, I would say this is an album of two halves or two sides, and literally in the sense of the A side is much better than the B side, in my opinion. On the A side, you're going to get tracks such as Sweet Power, Your Embrace, Free, and Mbewe. That's Mbewe. Nothing on the B side stands up to anything what's on the A side, and that's quite a disappointment. Um, Artists of note on this particular album would be Justo Almario on saxophone, Philip Wu on piano, and Clarice Taylor on vocals. She has a really good vocal range. It's very clear, like crystal clear, and the way she articulates the lyrics is really nice thing to listen to. I would say Michael Narada Walden on drums. Um, that name might be familiar to you. Certainly in the 80s and 90s, he had his own solo albums, as well as being a producer and songwriter in his own name, and he's got quite a few credits. I was totally disappointed with him on drums. I'm not sure what he was doing, but yeah, it was underwhelming. He was early in his career, but I don't think that was necessarily an excuse. They could have got a better session drummer to do the work that he was carrying out, in my opinion. So yeah, that was really quite a weird thing to discover, who was responsible for that underwhelming drum performance, and it was him. Yeah. So, but overall, fantastic album. A side's much better than the B side. Forget about the B completely. And if you are purchasing this album, do remember that as an entire body of work, it doesn't stand up. But if you're just listening to the A side, yeah, you're fine. I certainly don't regret buying it. The last album for today is the 1974 release by a Miss Patrice Rushen, and it's an album called Prolusion. Now, you may be familiar with this young lady, or was then young lady, from her later work in her career, with tracks such as You Remind Me and Forget Me Nots. Those are commercial hits. But this album is her first album at the age of 20. Um, I'm lost for words at how good this album is. Yes, Miss Rushen was later to become a multi-Grammy Award winner, R&B, disco and jazz vocalist, a composer, classically trained pianist, producer, musical director and educator. Those things came later on in her career, but this was her first outing. Just so we can put this into context, have a listen to the other artists who feature on this album. Oscar Brashear on trumpet, Joe Henderson on sax, uh, Leon Chancellor, otherwise as Ndogu, on drums, and that's one of the surprising ones. Ndogu is one of those gentlemen who he's a musician's musician. So if you search him for him and his actual credits, you will find that he's on everybody's albums, and is, you know, it's justified. A Kenneth Nash on percussion and Tony Dumas on bass. Look up each one of those names and look at their credits, and then go back and think this was on a 20-year-old's album. They contributed to it, so that's how much respect they had for her. Yeah, this is an absolutely beautiful jazz fusion album. In my reckoning, totally underrated, and it's a real shame. I love this album, particularly knowing it's a debut as well. But more people need to know about this album, how good it is. The standout tracks, in my opinion, would be Shorty's Portion, 773, and Traverse. Do have and listen to it on one of the streaming sites. If you do happen to see it, just get it. It's a no-brainer. If you're into fusion and jazz, this one should be in your collection. It really should be. She's really that good. So that's the fifth and last album for today. I hope you enjoyed the content for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'd like to thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Take care of yourselves, okay? Bye bye.